Hello, welcome to this video of a showcase of socioeconomic modeling. My name is Martin and we are looking at Swiss cantons where there are more lawyers than medical doctors. So that's the data for today. We're looking for an explanation why certain regions or Swiss cantons have more lawyers. We will use a linear model. We will come up with a linear model, taking into account the number of medical doctors and some other economic and demographic variables. But first, the first step to always take when doing modeling of this kind is to have an exact look at the data. We're going to use R, of course. And we first gonna load, where's R? Load the libraries. We're gonna use the tidyverse, we're gonna use readxl, ggrepel scales for plotting, broom for tidying up linear models, and raster ggmaap rgdal is for the map representations. So all the, you find the outline for this video on RPubs that I will put in the description of this video. Also you will find the links for downloading the data. So most data is downloaded from the Swiss Confederation Office for Statistics. So I already have it in my files. In data, I downloaded the data, so I have an easy task to just load it. So this is what I'm doing. Like now, data, lawyers, we have this, we have the doctors, and we have the cantons that we get from Wikipedia. And the Swiss cantons, the abbreviation code and the name. So here we load these and we match it, or we left join it basically with the number of doctors and number of lawyers. So at the end we have a data set not only with the abbreviation but also with the canton name, with the year of the observation and with the total count. You also wait, this is something else. So we also will use the inhabitant number of population or population data for Switzerland, also from the Office of Statistics, as well as GDP data from the same source. GDP, here we go. So all this data, the wrangling that we're doing here, we basically select the things that we are interested in. The issue always with this kind of data is that it's not machine readable as it is. It is not a CSV file with just very long, tidy format, but you need to specify, like here, reading this Excel, all rows before 4 are basically irrelevant. Also, everything that comes up after 36 is not relevant. So the task is always, it's not ideal, but that's just, it's not made for having the data machine readable. So you have to have a look, open the spreadsheet, have a look what you need and specify this when you read the Excel. You skip the first lines and so forth. Also interesting data that we have found is that we're going to use for trying to explain the higher number of lawyers is the patient flow. So this is data also from the statistical office in Switzerland. Here, let's open it quickly. And you see basically in 2017 the origin of the patient, say a patient from Zurich, how many of these Zurich patients were treated in hospitals located in Bern, and that's a total of 871 patients or treatments treated in Bern that are resident of Zurich, as opposed to Bern residents or Bern people being treated in Zurich. Where's Zurich? Zurich. Here it is, 700. So at the end you can conclude that more Zurich residents were treated, slightly more Zurich residents were treated in Bern as opposed to Bern being treated in Zurich. So from this data we are computing a flow of patients where we have the net flow in absolute. So in Zurich you have a positive inflow of patients as opposed to, say, Obwalden, which has a negative flow, an outflow of patients. And we also have the relative to the residence population. Not do this. So going back to the script, we are doing some first plots. The first one being this scatter plot of doctors, physicians on the y-axis and lawyers on the x-axis. We see centered here Zurich, and Geneva is on the upper end in terms of lawyers as well as doctors, only beaten by Basel City, with the most physicians per 1,000 inhabitants of our data set. Most of the cantons are here, down here, just at the center of the cluster. You have some middle part here with Ticino, Neuchâtel and Zug, as well as Zurich and the outliers that I mentioned. The idea, so we see there is a positive trend. I have here the linear model approximation. So we want to find if there's an actual model we can build upon this knowledge. Also here, interesting, just from trying to understand the data, is the number of lawyers per, or number of doctors here per lawyer. So you see there's some cantons such as Basel countryside, which a lot of doctors and less lawyers. Same with other cantons which are more in the out of the agglomeration, Appenzell, Thurgau, Schaffhausen, Aargau, Agovia, which show a similar pattern as opposed to, say, Geneva or Zug, which has an overhang in lawyers. And we also do some map representations, which I saw that we don't have available in the transcript when it comes to code. So this is what we want to do quickly. Maps. I don't think we need these. Oops. This is not something that is necessary. Let's run this. And again, you see the canton with most physicians, Basel, Geneva, as well as Zurich is pretty on the high up on the scale. Let's not do this. Let's also have the same pattern for, or similar pattern for lawyers, again with Geneva being very strong, Zurich, Ticino, Neuchâtel, and the relative, which is basically the plot, this plot on a geographical representation with Geneva, Zug, Neuchâtel, Ticino, and as well as Uri here, which due to the small sample size is less meaningful, of course. Also on the blue end of the scale. So next, we want to do some linear models. Linear models in the sense to try to explain linear models to explain the data. Why do we observe certain characteristics that we don't observe in other cantons? And again, most important, the one takeaway message I want to give is don't just randomly input data. So of course you can find, by trying very hard, variables that explain very well your data, but this doesn't mean that they're actually related in any way. So you randomly find data, your data, the number of lawyers, highly dependent on the height of the buildings or on the number of birds spotted per year per canton, with a very high significant level, at a very high level of significance. This most probably does not make it a good model, even though the statistical significance is high by a random mechanism. So we, for explaining the number of lawyers, we take the number of doctors, the population, the GDP, BIP in German, as well as the net flow relative to the patients. That's the spreadsheet that I opened a minute ago. And we will use, let's do this. We use sjplot for having them in a nice representation. And we don't have that model. Let's do it again. L model. Why? I think we need to do this. Otherwise it will not work. I have to compute the data first. And now we can learn this and have the tab model from sjplot. And we see that there is model 1, which does have high significance for the number of doctors, model 2 as well, and model 3 still. However, we do not see significance on any of the additional imported parameters, features. Does this mean that our model is pointless, not worth it? No, you can still come to the conclusion that there is no dependency directly on the additional factors. Most probable, and looking at the data, so we do this B plot. I imported ggbeeswarm. Why is it not doing it all? Here it is. You see that Geneva is up here and somehow related with the higher density in physicians as well, Basel City and Zug, Neuchâtel, and most probable in my view is this to be explained by canton-specific characteristics. So Geneva, very strong in international trade, international organizations, similar Basel, strong pharmaceutical, strong wealthy population, Zug, international companies, holding companies, Zurich, regional center in Switzerland, economic power. Not 100% sure about Neuchâtel and Ticino, which also show both high stats for, especially for the number of lawyers, and also kind of high values for the number of medical doctors. Let's look at the European data, so expand our analysis to Europe. And we get the number of lawyers from CCBE, the rest of the stats from Eurostat, the statistical office for the European Union. We have to also do some data wrangling. Do this, oops, this. We left join. We have the doctors. Here we exclude the ones that are hospital doctors, basically. We also read in GDP and population. GDP, here, this, and we match it with the country codes that we also get from Eurostat. So basically Belgium is BE, Greece is EL, and so forth. Codes. And we end up with this nice data set. Country code, number of lawyers, number of doctors, population, GDP, per capita, and also the ratios for lawyers and physicians per 100 inhabitants. Let's also we have to remove the incomplete ones because they're missing data. We cannot use some because there's just no stats on the number of doctors, and of course this reduces some of the meaning of the model that we're going to come up. So we have to remove the UK, Italy, France. They're also big countries, which of course isn't ideal, but it's the only way to do it at the moment. We left with Austria, Finland, Latvia, and a couple of other countries. So again, let's do a scatter plot and analyze the scatter plot. And we see again immediately EL, just mentioned before, EL is Greece, very high in the number of physicians. It's an outlier number of physicians per 100 inhabitants. Like middle field in the number of lawyers with 2. Here at another extreme, LI is Liechtenstein, the tiny country next to Switzerland, with a lot of lawyers relative to the population. I believe population is just 35,000 inhabitants. Cyprus also strong in the number of lawyers, and others that are more to the on the left of the scales. Denmark, Hungary, and Poland, for example. So again, let's do this B-plot. And on first side, again, without even having done any linear model, we see that Liechtenstein, Cyprus, probably also Iceland, probably can be explained by economic factors or country-specific factors, more specifically. Liechtenstein, a lot of international companies, holding companies, not actually producing there, but being there for tax reasons. Same for Cyprus. Not 100% for the Iberic countries, Spain, Portugal. Iceland might also be an international domicile for countries. We have Greece with a lot of physicians. Also not 100% sure about the reason for this. Probably, or one reason I could think of is that there is a weaker public hospital care, so a lot of individual physicians are counted in Greece. But anyway, we will do a linear model as such, also taking into account the population and the GDP per capita. And we see that in the first model, without the GDP, we have some significance estimating the number of lawyers or the density of lawyers based on the density of medical doctors. However, as soon as we include GDP per capita, there is no more significance on any level anymore. Although we see that the R square is pretty low for this for both models. So again, in conclusion, does this mean that our whole approach is just wrong or not right? No, because in socioeconomic modeling, you're not 100% going for the best predictor. You're not trading, you're not betting on anything. You want to give a reasoning, you want to get more knowledge about the data. So that's what we do. Of course, if you want to have a closer look, do a proper analysis for the data, yes, go look for more data. Go see if you find data which have meaning for taking into account the number of small companies, say, or what is the effect in the Iberic countries. Why does Greece have so many physicians, individual physicians, and so forth? So that's the end of my analysis. Have a look at my transcript. Thanks for watching and see you next time.